For regular videos on ancient cultures and forgotten civilizations, please subscribe. It's been a while since we had a Q&A. Why don't we listen to some voicemails, see what we've got here.
Hi, Dr. Miano. I'm a student from New Zealand. So recently during a lecture, I first learned about the existence of an ancient Roman port called Arikamedu in Puducherry, which is all the way out in the Bay of Bengal in India. This really blew my mind when I learned about this. So my question is this. How far outside of their empire do we know that the ancient Romans held a tangible presence, and how far do you suspect that they may have travelled? Kia ora. Thank you.
And thank you for your question. It's a good one. The best way to see if the Romans had a tangible presence somewhere is, of course, through material remains. For example, how far out do we see Roman architecture? The furthest Roman temple I know of is the Temple of Garni in Armenia. The remains of a Roman aqueduct are also in Armenia, near Khor-Virab. We already know, however, that the Romans conquered Armenia and Mesopotamia. They didn't hold these areas long, but they were there. The Khorasan Islands, a group of small coral islands in the Red Sea, and which are now part of Saudi Arabia, were occupied by the Romans, situated far down the Red Sea near Yemen and Eritrea. These islands were known as Portus Phaericianus in the 1st century CE. They're thought to have been the most distant Roman outpost from Rome itself. A Latin inscription from 144 indicates that the Romans established a garrison on the islands. The islands were likely administratively part of the Roman province of Arabia Felix before being reassigned to the province of Aegyptus, Egypt. Charax, located in Crimea, is the largest Roman military settlement excavated in the region and another one of the Roman Empire's most remote outposts. Established under Emperor Vespasian, the fort protected Bosporan trade centers from the Scythians. The Romans abandoned the fort in the mid-3rd century. These are the furthest military stations that I know about. But trade took the Romans even farther afield. Most of what we know about Roman trade comes from written sources. The 1st century historiographer Pliny the Elder mentions a description of the world commissioned by Emperor Augustus. The work was intended to gather all necessary information in the East when the emperor's eldest son was about to set out for Armenia to take the command against the Parthians and Arabians. This was around 1 BCE. Pliny attributes the work to a Dionysius, but some scholars believe that to be an error, suggesting that Isidora of Charax was the actual author. Isidore was a Greco-Roman geographer from the 1st century BCE and 1st century CE, known only by his name and his writings. His most famous work is the Parthian Stations, an itinerary detailing the overland trade route from Antioch to India, following the caravan stations of the Arsacid Empire. He measured distances in skini ropes, though the exact length of these units is debated. Isidora likely wrote the work sometime after 26 BCE. The surviving version of the Parthian Stations appears to be a summary of a more extensive original. By Augustus's time, if not earlier, a sea captain named Hippolus had discovered, or more likely introduced to the west, a relatively safe and predictable sea route to India. This involved departing from Aden on the summer monsoon and returning on the anti-trade winds of winter. Strabo notes that after Augustus took control of Egypt, up to 120 ships were sailing annually from Myos Hermos to India. He writes, "At any rate, when Gallus was prefect of Egypt, I accompanied him and ascended the Nile as far as Syene and the frontiers of Ethiopia, and I learned that as many as 120 vessels were sailing from Myos Hermos to India, whereas formerly, under the Ptolemies, only a very few ventured to undertake the voyage and to carry on traffic in Indian merchandise." Cassius Dio, writing after 229 CE, in his book, noted, "Many embassies came to him, Augustus, and the Indians, having previously proclaimed the Treaty of Alliance, concluded it now with the presentation, among other gifts, of tigers, animals which the Romans, and if I mistake not the Greeks as well, saw for the first time." The Romans had already heard of Sri Lanka, known to the Greeks as Taprobane. However, it was during Emperor Claudius's reign, 1st century, that the two cultures first made contact. According to Pliny in the Natural History, a freedman working for the Roman tax collector Annius Plocamus, who managed Red Sea customs for Rome, was blown off course by northern monsoon winds while sailing along the Arabian coast, and ended up in Hipporos, a port in Sri Lanka. The freedman was warmly received by the Sinhalese monarch, and over 6 months learned Sinhala. The historical existence of Anius Plocamus is supported by graffiti found on the ancient Koptos Berenike road in Egypt, attributed to Lysos, a freedman of Plocamus. The Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, a Greek text authored by an anonymous sea captain between 40 and 50 CE, catalogues ports from Barbaricon at the Indus's mouth, near modern Karachi, around the southern tip of India, and up to the Ganges' mouth near modern Calcutta. Unlike the detailed accounts of western ports, the author provides little political information on the east coast ports, possibly indicating he did not visit them personally. The text suggests that western vessels typically did not venture beyond the southern tip of the Indian peninsula. Pliny the Elder, again, writing around 77, offers a detailed but sometimes inaccurate account of India and its trade. The Puttinger table, a medieval reproduction of a 4th or early 5th century map, depicts a temple to Augustus at Muziris, a key trade port with the Roman Empire on India's southwest coast. Located in Kerala, Muziris was a vital trade hub in Tamilakam, facilitating commerce between the Chera Empire and Rome. Recent archaeological efforts at Pattanam, where large hoards of coins and numerous shards of amphorae have been found, are aimed at locating this port city. Southern India, particularly Arikamedu, which is the site you mentioned, provides the best archaeological evidence of Roman presence in India. Arikamedu was once a Tamil fishing village and major Chola port, specializing in bead making and trade with Roman merchants. It thrived for centuries until the Romans departed in the 5th century. Numerous Roman artifacts, including amphorae marked by Roman potter schools, Vibii, Kamuri, and Ita, have been discovered there, underscoring the significant ancient trade between Rome and the Tamil region, encompassing modern Tamil Nadu and parts of Sri Lanka. Many Roman gold coins from the time of Augustus and 1st and 2nd century emperors have been found in southern India. Notably, a large number of Roman aurei and denarii from Augustus to Nero, spanning approximately 120 years, have been found along the route from Mangalore through the Muziris area and around India's southern tip up to southeastern ports. But you know what? We have evidence that the Romans went even farther. In his geography, Claudius Ptolemy of the 2nd century offers a rough depiction of the Gulf of Thailand and the South China Sea. He mentions a port city named Kattigara, located beyond the Golden Chersonese, the Malay Peninsula, reportedly visited by a Greek sailor named Alexander. Ptolemy relied on Alexander's accounts for his geographical understanding of the Magna Sinus, the Gulf of Thailand and South China Sea, situated east of the Golden Chersonese. Archaeological findings from settlements in this region, dating between 100 and 500 CE, such as Okeo, reveal sophisticated architecture and extensive maritime trade networks. Artifacts, including Roman gold glass ornaments and beads, have been discovered in various parts of Southeast Asia, particularly near the Mekong Delta. Okeo in Vietnam is one of the proposed sites for Ptolemy's Kattigara and is recognized as a significant port and urban center of the Funan Kingdom. Excavations at Okeo have unearthed 2 Roman medallions, one from the time of Antoninus Pius, that's the 2nd century, and another from the reign of Marcus Aurelius, later in the 2nd century. Additionally, jewelry pieces, either originating from or inspired by the Mediterranean region, have been found at Okeo. There is evidence suggesting that Romans may even have reached China. Han Empire court chroniclers describe the arrival of diplomats or merchants from the Roman Empire, referred to as Daqin, at Luoyang, the capital city of China, likely via maritime routes. These sources, such as the Book of the Later Han, mention that the travelers claimed to be sent by Andun or Antun, ruler of Daqin, which may correspond to Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius Antoninus. It is believed the travelers may have entered China from the south, through one of the Han Empire's southern frontier commanderies. Whether these travelers were genuine Roman emissaries or subjects of the Roman Empire remains debated. Some scholars speculate that these individuals were enterprising merchants and traders, possibly from the eastern provinces of the empire, rather than official representatives. A few years ago, there were claims circulating online that DNA tests revealed residents in the remote village of Lozhuangzi, Gansu, in China, to be descendants of Roman mercenaries who supposedly fought the Han Chinese 2,000 years ago. No concrete evidence of Romans in Gansu before the Christian era exists, but debate has persisted about whether the Romans fought in the Battle of Jiji in 36 BCE and settled in Lijian, Gansu. This theory, initially proposed by sinologist Homer Dubbs in the 1950s, has been both criticized and supported among scholars. Some Chinese researchers in the late 1980s even identified Lozhuangzi on the Gobi Desert's fringes as the probable location of ancient Lijian. In the 1990s, Chinese archaeologists discovered ancient fortifications in Lijian, resembling Roman defensive structures. This piqued interest in the theory that Romans settled there. In 2005, with relaxed regulations on genetic research, scientists collected blood samples from 93 people in Lijian, hoping DNA tests would clarify the high incidence of Western traits like green eyes, large noses, and even blonde hair mixed with traditional Chinese features. The tests confirmed some villagers had Caucasian ancestry, sparking speculation about descent from Roman soldiers. However, skeptics noted Lijian's location on the Silk Road, a historic melting pot of diverse travelers. Despite these findings, no Roman artifacts such as coins or weaponry have been discovered in the area. Subsequent DNA studies did not support a Roman mercenary origin, showing instead that the modern Lijian population genetically aligns with the Chinese Han majority. The Caucasian appearance of some villagers can be explained without the Roman hypothesis. Genetic studies indicate they share a population mix similar to the Uyghurs, a hybrid group with roughly equal West and East Eurasian ancestry. This mix, resulting from migrations and assimilations across Eurasia between 500 and 1000 CE, gives some Uyghurs a West Asian and Northern European appearance, yet lacks the South European ancestry dominant in both Tuscans and North Italians. If the Chinese Romans were genuinely Roman, they would exhibit specific Southwest European ancestry, which the 2005 DNA test did not confirm. The Gansu villagers are simply part of the genetic diversity on China's western borders, historically inhabited by European-looking peoples like the Tocharians until relatively recently. The people of Lijian are essentially a Chinese-speaking group whose ancestry, blending West and East Eurasian influences, perpetuates the illusion of Roman descent, sustaining the story's persistent allure.
Hey, Dr. Miano. I was wondering, who was the first literate king ever, out of any language in the world, and how did they get to be able to read? Thanks for your time.
Okay, and thank you very much for your question. It's one of those very difficult questions to answer because information is very scarce. In ancient Mesopotamia, scribes, as you probably know, were highly educated individuals proficient in writing and reading on various subjects. Initially, their primary role was to record financial transactions related to trade, but over time they became essential to many aspects of daily life, from the palace and the temple to the smallest villages or farms. Students, mostly male, unless an upper-class family sought literacy for their daughter, attended classes from dawn until dusk. The student body typically included children of nobility, scribes, clergy, and also merchants. It's likely that children of kings were also educated in this way, with some eventually becoming rulers, so you see the potential. But our first concrete example is Shulgi of Ur, who reigned around 2000 BCE, who was known as a scribe that wrote poetry and promoted literacy and the establishment of schools throughout the kingdom. Shulgi was renowned for his extensive revision of the scribal school's curriculum. Although the extent of his actual writings is uncertain, numerous praise poems are attributed to and directed towards him. Shulgi claims in inscriptions to be fluent in Elamite and Sumerian. In his praise poems, he's called a mathematical god, emphasizing his skills in addition, subtraction, calculation, and accounting. In ancient Egypt, literacy levels were remarkably low, with probably no more than 1% of the population able to read and write. Consequently, scribes were highly esteemed and proud of their skills, which set them apart from the common people. And this is true, obviously, in Mesopotamia as well. But this raises the question of whether the pharaohs themselves, as rulers of Egypt, were part of this literate elite. There is a tradition suggesting that some pharaohs of the first dynasty were literate, although the historical accuracy of this tradition is debatable since it is preserved in much later sources. According to Manetho, this is 3rd century BCE, the second king of the first dynasty, referred to as Athothis, possibly Aha, practiced medicine and wrote anatomical and surgical treatises. The earliest direct evidence of royal literacy comes from the end of the 5th dynasty. An official named Senejamib, called Inti, who served under King Jedkara Izesi, late 25th, early 24th century, mentions in the biographical inscription on his tomb at Saqqara that he received a letter, quote, His Majesty wrote himself with his own fingers as a reward, unquote. The absence of this detail in other royal letters of the time suggests it was not a typical formula, but rather genuine historical information. Furthermore, in a letter to another official named Rashepses, King Jedkar Essesi expresses his pleasure upon receiving a letter. Quote, My Majesty has seen this beautiful letter which you have brought to the palace on this beautiful day, when the heart of Essesi himself is truly pleased because of what he truly loves for my Majesty, desired to see this letter of yours more than anything. It is unlikely that merely seeing the letter would make the king so glad. So to see probably refers to comprehending its contents by reading it himself. Therefore, it is reasonable to think that Jedkara Essesi was indeed literate. I looked around other places in the world and could not find any contemporary sources that attest to the literacy of any ruler before these examples. We have writings from later times attributing literacy to early kings, but since they're so far removed from this time, we don't know how trustworthy those sources are.
Hello, sir. I am Amit from India, and I would like to ask you that whether the ancient Indian political scientist and philosopher Chanakya was a real character or not.
Thank you for your question, Amit. For those unfamiliar, Chanakya was a pivotal figure during the era of the Mauryan Empire in India, particularly during its establishment by Chandragupta Maurya. Historical records about Chanakya are scarce, and most of what we know comes from semi-legendary sources. The tales of Chanakya and Chandragupta are found in Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain texts, with varying details in later works. According to these sources, Chanakya, a Brahmin, and Chandragupta's tutor, assisted in overthrowing the Nanda dynasty due to a personal vendetta. After dethroning the Nandas, he installed Chandragupta as the ruler. The earliest account is from the Mahavamsa, a Buddhist chronicle written in Pali, generally dated between the 5th and 6th century CE. The Mahavamsa provides a historical record of Sri Lanka, including the life and reign of Chandragupta Maurya. It offers insights into Chanakya's role in the formation of the Mauryan Empire. Complementing the Mahavamsa is its commentary, the Vamsathapakasini, I hope I said that right, which provides additional details about the legend. The exact date of the Vamsathapakasini is uncertain, but it's estimated to have been written anytime between the 6th and 13th centuries CE. Another significant source is the Mudra Rakshasa, a Sanskrit play by Vishakadatta. The date of its composition is uncertain, but it mentions the Huna, who invaded northern India during the Gupta period, suggesting it could not have been composed before the Gupta era. The Mudra Rakshasa is dated variously between the late 4th century to the 8th century. The play contains narratives not found in other versions of the Chanakya-Chandragupta legend, leading to suspicions that much of it is fiction or legend. The play portrays the political intrigue and strategies used by Chanakya to place Chandragupta on the throne, and includes characters and events that emphasize Chanakya's cunning and resourcefulness. Fundamentally, the popularity of Chanakya is deeply rooted in this play. There are other legends about Chanakya, but they are from medieval times or later. These stories have contributed to the legendary status of Chanakya, depicting him as a master strategist and wise statesman whose influence was crucial in the formation and consolidation of the Mauryan Empire. But these are relatively late, centuries after the Mauryan Empire. But we have something else. Chanakya was not only renowned as a kingmaker, but also as the greatest exponent of realistic policies of governance and methods of diplomacy. And we have a book called the Arthashastra, meaning science of wealth or power. It is a fundamental text of political science and political economy, consisting of 15 books of about 6,000 sutras in a logical arrangement. The book had a long editorial history with additions made over many centuries, because it was actually used as a guidebook of statecraft by various governments. References to the Arthashastra in other Sanskrit literature attribute it variously to Vishnugupta, Kautilya, or Chanakya. These names are often used interchangeably. 4 verses in sloka meter occur in the text, all at the end of chapters, which refer directly or indirectly to the author. One reads, "Easy to grasp and understand and exact in substance, meaning, and words, this Shastra, free of the prolixity of other works, has been composed by Kautilya." Another reads, "These rules for composing edicts were composed by Kautilya after going through all the Shastras and mastering the forms for the benefit of the king." Now, this says the author is Kautilya, so that rules out Chanakya, right? No, actually, because we have writings, admittedly much later, that identify Kautilya with Chanakya. Another verse at the end of a chapter reads, "This Shastra was composed by him who angrily rescued Shastra, arms, and the earth, which was possessed by the Nanda king." This seems to be a direct reference to the story of Chanakya. Another verse reads, "Seeing the multiple errors in the texts of commentators, Vishnugupta himself made this sutra and commentary." The Panchatantra, a book of animal fables written in Sanskrit somewhere around 300 CE, according to scholarly estimates, explicitly identifies Chanakya with Vishnugupta. Other mentions are made in later texts identifying Chanakya with Vishnugupta or Kautilya. These verses that I just read to you and which come at the ends of chapters are commonly believed to be interpolations rather than passages written by the original author. So how trustworthy are they? We don't know. However, it's important to note that there is no inherent contradiction between the claims that Chanakya was responsible for the doctrines in the Arthashastra and that the text we have today is a product of a later period. These two assertions can coexist. The work could have been written and edited later, drawing from earlier teachings or writings. Given the derivative, traditional, and stratified nature of Sanskrit literature, this possibility is quite plausible. It is entirely conceivable that the Mauryan Chanakya, Kautilya, wrote an Arthashastra, and that a later editor rewrote it or compressed or compiled the text from the teachings of his school. In addition to the Arthashastra, Chanakya is also linked with the Chanakya Niti, a vast collection of aphoristic sayings in Sanskrit. These consist of philosophical thoughts, but primarily reflections on everyday life, addressing its problems and solutions. Proverbs. Similar to how wise sayings were attributed to King Solomon in the West, Chanakya's name was used to gather individual maxims into collections of wise sayings in India. The number of editions and manuscripts of Chanakya's sayings is immense. It is unknown how many were written, especially since many served popular rather than scholarly purposes. Many were used as textbooks for teaching Sanskrit or became so arbitrarily modified that their original forms could not be recognized. Therefore, it cannot be definitively asserted that he wrote all or even any of them. There is no way to tell. So that was a long way of saying Chanakya may have existed, but we can't say for certain. I think it's more likely than not, but how much of the legend is true and how much of the Arthashastra he wrote, these are open questions.
Hi, Dr. Miano. Love your show. This is Phil from Minnesota. I've been started watching some of your What Came First shows, and I caught my interest. You said Anatolia had been smelting iron since 2500 BCE. And I actually after that, I caught the first part of a Tutankhamun video about him having a dagger, an iron dagger, in his sarcophagus, which they claimed had to be ancient aliens because we didn't have the technology. But in your show going back to Anatolia was smelting iron at 2500 BCE, and Tutankhamun's reign was, 1330, 1320 BCE. I myself don't think it would be uncommon for him to have an iron dagger. I mean, figuring space and time, 1,000 years, and really not even at that time, wouldn't have been that hard to acquire an iron dagger. I would like your thoughts on this, and thank you very much. Keep up the good work.
And thank you, Phil, for your question. One of the things to keep in mind about this is that iron was used before iron technology was developed. The ancients didn't need to smelt to make use of iron in a limited way. And the Tutankhamun dagger is made of meteoric iron, not smelted iron. The earliest iron artifacts, going back at least to the 4th millennium BCE, were usually of meteoric origin. Because it was rare, it was commonly associated with sovereignty and power. But my comment about the Hittites was related to iron technology. This requires smelting, which is a process that involves heating an ore along with a chemical reducing agent to extract the desired base metal. This transformation of ore into metal requires significant expertise in selecting and preparing the necessary raw materials, clay for constructing combustion vessels and receptacles, and charcoal fuel. Iron was a more difficult material to work with because it didn't melt at the same temperatures used to melt other metals that were worked in the Bronze Age. Iron melts at 1,510 degrees Celsius, 2,750 degrees Fahrenheit. So iron was initially smelted in bloomeries, which were furnaces where bellows pumped air through a mixture of iron ore and burning charcoal. The carbon monoxide produced by the burning charcoal reduced the iron oxide in the ore to metallic iron. Bloomeries did not reach temperatures high enough to melt the iron, so the resulting metal formed as a spongy mass called a bloom at the furnace's bottom. Workers then repeatedly hammered and folded the bloom to remove molten slag, resulting in wrought iron, a malleable but relatively soft alloy. The potential of iron had to be uncovered through controlled pyrotechnical research and development, and it required expertise and experience in pyrotechnics as well as a deep understanding of metallurgy. One of the earliest smelted iron artifacts is a dagger with an iron blade found in a Hattic tomb in Anatolia, dated to 2500 BCE, and that is why I gave you the date I did. Recent excavations at Kaman Kalahoyuk uncovered pieces of iron slag, leading researchers to conclude that steel production began there in the 3rd millennium BCE. This project hypothesized the connections between the Proto-Hittites and the Assyrians or other Mesopotamian peoples, which may have contributed to the development of iron and steel in central Anatolia at that time. Traditionally, iron smelting has been attributed to the Hittites of Anatolia during the late Bronze Age, with the belief that their empire's power was based on their monopoly on ironworking. This theory suggested that the Sea Peoples, who invaded the eastern Mediterranean and destroyed the Hittite Empire at the end of the late Bronze Age, spread the knowledge of ironworking. However, this theory is no longer widely accepted, as there is no archaeological evidence of a Hittite monopoly on iron. Iron objects from Bronze Age Anatolia are comparable in number to those found in Egypt and other regions from the same period, with only a few being weapons. The availability of iron ore allowed the pre-Hittite people to develop iron technology early on. Interestingly, Cyprus, despite its limited ore resources, advanced in iron technology before others. It was also noted that the quality of iron varied, and some people produced better iron without clear reason, possibly due to closely guarded secrets. Another theory suggests that the collapse of empires at the end of the late Bronze Age disrupted copper and tin trade routes, driving the development of iron technology. Unlike copper and tin, which required long-distance transportation, iron ore was widely available. However, there is no archaeological evidence of a bronze or tin shortage in the early Iron Age. Bronze objects remained abundant, with consistent tin percentages compared to the late Bronze Age. While iron artifacts from the Bronze Age have been found across the eastern Mediterranean, bronze remained the predominant metal during this period. As iron technology spread, it gradually replaced bronze for tools and weapons across the region, including the Levant, Cyprus, Greece, Crete, Anatolia, and Egypt. Written texts mentioning iron appear in the 2nd millennium BCE, and the number of iron objects increases. Continuous iron production starts at the end of the 2nd millennium BCE. Around 1500 BCE, non-meteoric smelted iron objects begin appearing more frequently in Mesopotamia and Anatolia and Egypt. Complex societies in the eastern Mediterranean began to disappear around 1400, while iron objects become more common in the archaeological record. However, the number of iron artifacts is still not as extensive as bronze finds, complicating quantitative research on iron technology development. Iron artifacts are more prone to corrosion and deterioration than other metals used at the time, so we have to keep that in mind. Mesopotamia fully entered the Iron Age by 1000 BCE. The earliest known smelted iron artifact in Europe is a knife blade from the catacomb culture in present-day Ukraine, dating to around 2500 BCE. Throughout most of the Middle and Late Bronze Age in Europe, iron was present but rare, primarily used for personal ornaments, small knives, bronze repairs, and bimetallic items. Early examples of smelted iron in Central Europe include an iron knife or sickle from Slovakia, possibly from the 18th century BCE, an iron ring from Germany dating to around the 15th century BCE, and an iron chisel, also from Germany, dating to about 1000 BCE. By the 11th century BCE, iron swords had replaced bronze ones in southern Europe, particularly in Greece. By the 10th century, iron had become the predominant metal in use. The Carpathian Basin saw a significant increase in iron artifacts from the 10th century onward, with some finds possibly dating as early as the 12th century. Ironworking began in Scandinavia during the later Bronze Age, starting at least by the 9th century BCE. Iron swords from the 10th century have been found in Central Europe, but the Iron Age is considered to have truly begun in Europe with the Hallstatt culture around 800 BCE. By 500, the Latin culture experienced a substantial rise in iron production, and iron metallurgy became common in southern Scandinavia as well. The history of ferrous metallurgy in the Indian subcontinent began in the 2nd millennium BCE. Archaeological centers in Uttar Pradesh have yielded iron implements dating between 1800 and 1200 BCE, including iron nails, clamps, spearheads, arrowheads, awls, knives, bangles, sickles, and plows. Excavations also uncovered iron slag and elongated clay structures with burnt interiors, indicating iron manufacturing at these sites. The area around Malhar appears to have been a center of iron production, with archaeological sites at Malhar, the Baba Wal, Pahari, and the valley linked to the Garawatwa Pahar, a major source of hematite iron ore. This evidence suggests that ironworking in India began before the Vedic peoples migrated from northwestern India into the Gangetic Plain, challenging the notion that iron technology traveled with them, and indicating that India was an independent center for ironworking. In southern India, present-day Mysore, iron was used by the 12th to 11th centuries BCE. New evidence from Mayila Dumparai, I hope I pronounced that right, may push this date back further, with charcoal samples producing carbon dates of 1672 and a surprising 2172 BCE. However, more data is needed to draw definite conclusions about early iron production in southern India. By the early 13th century BCE, iron smelting was practiced on a large scale in India. The technology of iron metallurgy advanced significantly during the politically stable Maurya period and throughout peaceful settlements in the first millennium BCE. iron artifacts such as spikes and knives and daggers and arrowheads and bowls and spoons and saucepans, axes and chisels and tongs and door fittings date from between 600 and 200 BCE. They've all been discovered at several archaeological sites in India. The earliest known iron artifacts in China include 2 fragments excavated at the Mogo site in Gansu dated to the 14th century BCE during the period of the Siwa culture. One of these fragments, was made from a bloomery rather than meteoric iron, but the first significant group of bloomery iron artifacts in China date to the end of the 9th century BCE. In Hangdong, Jiangshan County, Shanxi Province, archaeologists found slag that is the earliest evidence of bloomery iron making in China. Tests indicate that the technology was mastered in the Central Plains during the Middle and Late Western Zhou dynasty, with furnace temperatures between 1050 degrees Celsius and 1100 degrees Celsius. By around 500 BCE, metal workers in the southern state of Wu achieved temperatures of 1130 degrees Celsius, allowing iron to combine with 4.3% carbon and melt, facilitating casting into molds. This method was much less laborious than forging each piece from a bloom. Although cast iron is brittle and unsuitable for striking implements, it can be decarburized to produce steel or wrought iron by heating it in air for several days. Metallurgical analyses of iron objects from the Baozishan Cemetery near Chengdu show that most tools and weapons were forged from decarburized iron and fined iron. Techniques like carburization, decarburization, and quenching were employed to control the malleability of the iron objects. These analyses reveal that the primary use of iron at Baozishan was for wrought iron and steel, demonstrating the importance of forging techniques in the Chengdu Plain during the Han Dynasty. Ironworking methods spread northward in China, and by 300 BCE, iron had become the material of choice for most tools and weapons. A mass grave in Hebei province, dated to the early 3rd century BCE, contains several soldiers buried with their weapons and equipment. The artifacts from this grave include wrought iron, cast iron, and quench-hardened steel, with only a few bronze weapons, likely used for ornamental purposes. Now, let's get back to Egypt. Meteoric iron is known in Egypt from around 3000 BCE, but the smelting of ores to produce usable iron occurred there much later. They imported some smelted iron, but making it themselves. Unlike other Middle Eastern regions that adopted iron after 1500 BCE, Egypt's earliest evidence of iron smelting comes from the Delta region, particularly at Naucratis, where large quantities of iron slag and some ore were found. The site of Naucratis dates to about 580 BCE, and the iron there was worked by Greek and Carian mercenaries. Additionally, iron was smelted in the Central Eastern Desert at Wadi Abu Gharida, evidenced by furnaces and olivine-rich slags dating to the Ptolemaic period. Similarly, iron appeared late in Nubia, with the earliest date being a radiocarbon date of around maybe 550 BCE. The capital of the kingdom of Kush, Meroe, yielded significant quantities of smelting slag, smithing hearths, and tuyères. Iron production in Meroe continued until the early 1st millennium CE, when the city was abandoned. Meroitic furnaces, constructed of fired brick, appear to have been derived from Egypt and introduced by the Romans. The large-scale iron production at Meroe may have produced more than 5,000 tons of iron, far exceeding local needs, which means they must have traded it. In Basar Togo, the multi-component site of Dakpasanaware revealed evidence of smelting from around 500 BCE up to the mid to late 1st millennium CE. The small smelting furnaces at Dakpasanaware were possibly powered by bellows. Research in Nigeria has uncovered significant data on the development of ironworking in sub-Saharan Africa. Archaeologists trace the evolution of iron smelting at sites such as Opi, dating from around 600 BCE to the late 1st millennium CE. During this early Iron Age, the furnaces were non-slag tapping. In Senegal, the site of Waldade produced iron tools and evidence of iron production on 2 mounds with calibrated dates of 800 to 200 BCE. This period falls within the radiocarbon black hole, making it difficult to narrow down. The earliest evidence indicates transitional use of iron between 800 and 550 BCE, but smelting was fully established by 200 BCE. Studies have identified many furnaces dating to the late 1st and early 2nd millennium CE. In Mauritania, evidence of iron smelting dates between 760 and 400 BCE. In Rwanda and Burundi, important archaeological sites have contributed to understanding the evolution of metallurgy. The early Iron Age in that area dates to around 500 BCE or perhaps earlier.
Hi, Dr. Miano. I have a question I'm not too sure has a solid answer, but it's been bothering me for so long, so I thought I'd throw it at you. So let's say archaeologists uncover the ruins of an ancient city. Do they ever think to dig even deeper? Like, what if there is something even more ancient beneath these ruins, something that would be really fantastic to uncover? I would really appreciate your insight into this. Thanks so much.
And thank you very much for your question. The short answer is yes, archaeologists absolutely do think to dig deeper, and usually do. Excavation is, of course, just one part of archaeology and not the first part. When establishing a new dig area, archaeologists usually conduct numerous surveys to predict where artifacts might be found. Popular methods include satellite photos and ground-penetrating radar, but sometimes they also dig random test holes in chosen areas. This gives them an idea of where to start working, but it doesn't tell them everything. As you may know, when they dig down, each soil layer or stratum represents a different cultural time period, which can vary in thickness from a few centimeters to several feet. Generally, the deeper the layer, the older it is. If funding allows and there are no other obstacles, archaeologists continue digging until they reach subsoil, a layer without artifacts. Once they've reached the natural ground or bedrock, then it becomes clear there's no point in digging further. They want to go down this far so they know when the site was first occupied. An important question, right? But keep in mind that digs often end when the funding runs out. Another thing to consider is that since excavation is a destructive process, once you do it, you can't do it again. As you go down, you destroy everything above. Right? So it's ethical to leave part of the site undisturbed. This is to ensure that future archaeologists with better technology have something untouched to study. If early 20th century archaeologists hadn't sometimes followed this practice, we would have lost valuable artifacts that can now be dated using modern methods like radiocarbon dating. But this usually means limiting the area they cover horizontally. It does not mean refraining from going all the way down vertically in one section, right? So there's nothing preventing them from continuing to go down, and they want to go down to find out where it all began.
Hello, David. I grew up, as many of us did in the 70s, watching In Search of and reading Chariots of the Gods and the late great Planet Earth. It was the golden age of the paranormal, conspiracies, ancient aliens, and lost ancient civilizations. In fact, I remember going to the multiplex and seeing documentaries about the afterlife, UFOs, Bigfoot, ESP, etc. But hey, that was the 70s. But it wasn't. Now, anyone with a Facebook account knows these subjects are as alive today as they ever were. Many with very little variation, and quite often after thorough debunking as either hoaxes, misunderstandings, or a naive understanding of ancient cultures. To reference Hydra, it is as if once a theory or evidence is refuted, it just pops up in a slightly different form, or it simply returns a little bit later as if nothing ever happened. It just won't die. So my question is, what methods can be employed to effectively battle the steady stream of misinformation we are exposed to on a daily basis, not only as it relates to the paranormal in ancient societies, but current events as well? Thank you so much, and thank you so much for your channel. I really love it. Thank you.
Great question. Let me start off by saying that it's much easier to equip ourselves against being fooled than it is equipping others. As for the former, I wrote a little booklet called How to Know Stuff. Some of you know about this already. It relates my thoughts on this. The link for which I put below all my videos. But what about the battle against misinformation itself? Well, There's a difference of opinion among subject experts about how to approach this kind of stuff. In the past, the most prevalent view was to ignore it. Don't feed the birds, You just have discussions within the academic framework, present at conferences, publish in academic journals, and go about your business. And even today, there are those who advocate this view. The idea is that if you draw attention to them, that will just turn more people on to them. But I think it's becoming apparent in this age of social media, this approach has no detrimental effect on the misinformation whatsoever. And it continues to spread and grow because sensationalism sells. There's something to be said about not taking the bait, though. I mean, a historian, an archaeologist, or a scientist does not need to respond to every person who challenges them to a debate or to submit to interrogation on social media. But people do have questions, and those questions should be answered. So today, there are many academics who are engaging, and I think that's a good thing. How about debate? People are always telling me I should debate others about this or that. But many professional historians say that if the science is settled, it's a bad idea to both sides it. And if you have a debate, are you not suggesting that both sides are just as valid? I don't think agreeing to a debate is an admission of this. In fact, you wouldn't be doing the debate if you didn't believe you were in the right. Some say you should never bring a misinformation advocate onto your own platform because you'll be helping them to spread their bad ideas. Now, of course, if you do a good job of showing how they are wrong, I think it's unlikely that their ideas will spread, but some are worried that you'll do a bad job. They don't trust that you can do it well, or the other interlocutor may resort to underhanded debate tactics that will make you look bad. My view is that live debate is not the best way of battling misinformation, though it has its uses if the subject expert can do the job well. The reason why it's not the best is because neither party can fact-check the other party easily on the fly. They can spit out some supposed facts, and you can't know if they're correct until the debate is over and you go read some articles to fact-check, right? This is why I prefer the slow debate. One person can prepare an argument after carefully researching a subject, then the other person can do the same. I do this with video essays. It could also be done with blogs. Whatever the case, I think the idea that ignoring misinformation is the best route has proven to be wrong. But what do we replace it with exactly? None of the methods work super well. Brent Lee from Some Dare Call It Conspiracy says that the best way to change someone's mind is to become their friend first, or to help people you know already, personally. But, of course, each of us can only do that with so many people. I think each subject expert will have an approach that works the best for them, based on their own personality. The variety of approaches, in my opinion, the variety is what's beneficial, because different people react in different ways. So it's best to employ many different tools to help them to understand the facts. And I've settled in on my own methods, but I'm not saying my way is best. My way has worked well with some people, and it fits my personality, so that is why I do it. And that'll do it for today. If anyone else would like to leave me a question on my voicemail, you can do so at speakpipe.com/David Miano. I can't guarantee that I will answer every voicemail I receive. It depends on how many I get and what you ask about. If it's a question about prehistoric times or about medieval times, I am less likely to answer it. Ancient history questions are the best. And how interesting I think the general audience will find it is important too. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. You might like my little e-booklet, Why Ancient History Matters. It's designed to persuade people that the subject is important, even in the modern world. You might also wish to use it to help spread the word. So feel free to share it with someone you know. It's free for anyone who wants it. I've left a link in the description box below the video for you to grab a copy. Catch you later.